Hi everyone. Today we're gonna look at the stock of a company called Ruger. Ticker is RGR. And in the next 15 minutes or so, I'm gonna talk to you guys about why I think right now is a pretty interesting time to look at stocks of gun manufacturers. I want to give the disclaimer that obviously this is not any shape or form investment advice. It's just my opinion and my analysis, right? So diving into what do they do? So Ruger is a gun manufacturer in the U.S. and over 99% of their sales are from the U.S. They manufacture three types of guns. They manufacture pistols, which make up about a third of their sales, revolvers, about 15% of their sales, and finally rifles, their biggest segment, which is makes up over half of their sales. So Ruger is, in terms of their enterprise value, it's a $946 million company. That's very small. It falls squarely within what people will call small cap stocks, which means that as far as publicly traded companies go, it's quite small. And it's currently trading at about $66 as of last Friday. Recently went as high as $90 back in like August, but it's kind of fallen back down to the 60s, mid 60s, which is the level it was trading at basically in 2017 and 2018. I kind of looked into why the stock has fallen so much, and the reason I found was that people looked at the number of background checks that were done when people needed to purchase firearms, and they saw that the number had kind of gone down August and September, and assumed that there was a direct correlation to the number of gun sales. While I think there's some truth to it, I don't read too much into this number because there's a lot of other things that go into the number of background checks that are reported, like when people are renewing the license for a gun, that's also goes into here. There's a lot of like administrative administrative checks that also go in here. So this doesn't really represent, it's not like a one-on-one correlation. In fact, in 2019, it was a year with like the highest background checks ever. And it was a terrible year for gun manufacturers. 2018, in fact, was much better, and 2017 was better than that. But the checks kept going up. So I don't know. I don't read too much into this number as other people did. But so on to the reasons why I think it's a pretty interesting time to look at gun manufacturers. I mean, number one, 2020 is an election year, and gun manufacturers tend to do really well on during election years. So if you recall, 2016 was an election year, and you can see that all throughout the years, gun sales were up quite a bit. Now let's go back another 4 years. 2012 was an election year. Very, very high gun sales. These are year-over-year increases, right? So 52% in Q4, 45 in Q3, 49 in Q2. Going back even further, 2008 was an election year, as well as the kind of the financial crisis, and huge increases in Q3 and Q4 of 2008, 31% year over year, 70% year over year, right? I mean, that also coincided with the financial crisis. I mean, the conclusion that the reason why I think it's, gun sales are so much higher is because when there's like periods of uncertainty and perceived change, people tend to buy guns if they can to cope with, to kind of as a way maybe to control what they think is, controlling the uncertainty and the change, right? So number two, right now the polls are showing that Democrats are in the lead by something like 10 points. If that is true, a Democratic victory is actually very positive for gun stocks in the short term. And that may be counterintuitive if you know anything about American politics, because the Democrats tend to be very kind of not, I don't want to say anti-gun, but they tend like gun control tends to be one of their top agenda items. They want to limit the number of guns people have, and you think that's like bad for gun stocks, but like in the short term, it's actually really good because because the perception of more regulation to limit guns will just cause people to buy more guns in the short term to anticipate that, right? So think about it like if like Costco said next in 2 weeks you're only allowed to buy 2 rolls of toilet paper. What's everyone going to do? They're going to run to the store and they're going to buy as many toilet paper, as many rolls of toilet paper as they can while before they put in the regulation. So similar idea. If the Democrats win, people are going to perceive that as, hey, there might be like regulation down the road that's going to make me harder to buy guns. I'm going to push my consumption ahead and buy what I can now, right? So you might be like, oh, but that's like long term, it's still not good, right? But I mean, Wall Street tend to care about quarter results. We're very short term focused, earnings culture, right? So finally, if you live in the U.S., it's probably no surprise that like recently there's been a lot of civil and social unrest in the country and a lot of polarization. And just when people feel like they don't feel safe or they can't trust the police force, or they don't, and people are not getting along, your neighbors are not getting along, then it's like that definitely logically leads to an increase in people buying guns. So that was like kind of the first point, which is the recent development in why specifically about 2020. It might be a good time to look at gun stocks, right? And secondly, is the concept that gun stocks kind of fall into this category of stocks called sin stocks, along with gambling stocks like casino stocks and tobacco stocks. And with the rise of something in the investing world called ESG, which stands for environmental social governance, a lot of the big like active asset managers have adopted a lot of asset managers have adopted this framework, and they're kind of precluded from investing in these companies they perceive as like non-ESG, and firearms are oftentimes non-ESG. So even if like an asset manager really liked the fundamentals of the stock, because it's not ESG, they can't invest in it. So I think there's like a discount with these types of stocks because some people who may like the fundamentals, who think it's like a great company, are not able to buy it, right? So there's like an inherent discount. Let's now look at valuations. I think valuations for Ruger are actually pretty attractive. Trailing 12-month as of Q2 of 2020, they're trading at 9 times their free cash flow. Quarter earlier, about 15 times free cash flow. Decent ROIC. I mean, not like software company level, but decent ROIC. I looked at one of their comps, which is called Smith & Wesson. It's actually like one of their only comps. It's very similar sized companies. Also did, very attractive in terms of valuation and really killed it. All the gun manufacturers really killed it this year. And remember, the average company in S&P has a P of 30. In the small cap, which is the Russell 2000, that P is probably even higher because small companies are not as profitable as big companies, so they have even a higher P. And right now, gun manufacturers have a P of just like 10 times, so it's very attractive in terms of valuation. I do want to talk about some of the risks to my thesis, right? So speaking of valuation, we may be looking at what I call peak earnings, which means they're just killing it right now. But this is like the peak. It's not going to get much better than this, because look at 2019. 2019 was horrible for gun manufacturers. 2018 was pretty good. 2017 wasn't so great. So this kind of the point is that there's a lot of cyclicality in their earnings. It means there's a lot of volatility. Some years they do very well, some years they don't. And if you're not comfortable with a company having a lot of cyclicality, ups and downs in earnings, then like gun manufacturer is not something that you should look at because there is a lot of cyclicality in their earnings. Another risk is obviously we talked about how Democrats are good for the short term for gun manufacturers. Then conversely, Republicans, a victory must be bad in November, right? Because then people are like, oh, we got Republicans they're not going to change the regulations, so it's fine. Finally, the high kind of the worst case scenario is Democrats win, and then there's basically they go overboard and they basically release a lot of regulations that drastically control the sale of guns to the point where it's difficult for gun manufacturers to even do business, right? If they can't sell guns. I mean, I think that's quite an unlikely distinct possibility, just because the right to bear arms is like in our Second Amendment, and it's quite difficult to change that. And people have been trying to do it for forever with really not much progress, right? So, and this is going to affect Ruger, right? Because I think one of the big gun regulation they're trying to push out is like no assault rifles, and you see that Ruger, one of their biggest segments is rifles. So, but I find this to be kind of a unlikely scenario, an unlikely risk. So that's my quick analysis on Ruger. I don't really know much about firearms, so I can't tell you what about the product specifically, but if you have any comments, let me know down below in the comments, and thanks for watching.